The Frog Prince. In the palace of a great kingdom, it was never quiet. Doors opened and closed, servants hurried through the corridors, and laughter always drifted through the garden. There, by the fountain, the princess loved to play with her favorite golden ball. She tossed it into the air, caught it, tossed it again, and laughed when it bounced across the stones. Once more, she said to herself and swung her arm harder. This time, something went wrong. The ball struck the edge of the fountain, bounced, and splash! Fell straight into the water. No, the princess cried and leaned over the fountain. The water was deep and dark. The ball was gone. She sat down on the edge and crossed her arms. Croak, so you dropped it? The princess jumped. A green head with big eyes rose from the water. A frog? Not an ordinary frog, but one that looked straight at her. I did, said the frog. I saw everything. Your ball is down there. The princess frowned. I can, replied the frog, but not without something in return. The princess sighed. The frog smiled wide. What? The princess stood up. That's strange. Your ball is down there, the frog said calmly. The princess looked at the water, then at the frog. The frog dove under, and a moment later jumped back up with the wet golden ball. The princess grabbed it, smiled with relief, and ran toward the palace without looking back. The frog watched her disappear and said quietly. Then he hopped after her. The princess entered the palace, pressing the golden ball to her chest as if nothing unusual had happened. She passed the guards, climbed the stairs, and sat down at the dinner table, pleased to have her favorite toy back. Just as the servants began setting down the plates, a quiet but clear sound was heard. Croak, croak. The princess froze. No, she whispered. That can't be. Croak, princess, open up. Everyone in the hall looked at one another. One of the servants opened the door, and there on the threshold stood the frog, wet, green, and completely serious. I'm here, he said. You promised? The princess frowned. I did, the frog replied, and I remember very well. The king raised an eyebrow. The princess sighed and told him everything about the fountain, the ball, and the promise. The king listened carefully and nodded. Promises must be kept, he said calmly, even when they are made in a hurry. But father, the princess exclaimed, it's a frog. Exactly, the king replied, and it has done its part. The frog cleared his throat softly. The princess frowned, then pushed her plate slightly aside. The frog hopped onto the chair and looked at the food with interest. The princess could not help looking at him again. The frog was strange, but also, somehow brave. He was not afraid of the hall, the people, or their stares. She began to wonder if this promise might turn out to be more important than she had thought. She tried to focus on her dinner, but the frog beside her kept studying everything with curiosity. He looked at the plates, the glasses, the candles, as if each one were a brand new discovery. Is that soup? The frog asked, leaning a little too close. Yes, the princess replied, sliding the bowl away. And it's not for frogs. Well, not an ordinary frog anymore, he said proudly. I'm sitting at a royal table. The king smiled, and a few servants exchanged looks, trying not to laugh. After dinner, the princess stood up sharply. Wonderful, said the frog. So do I. She turned slowly. Your promise, the frog answered calmly, to be with you. The princess climbed the stairs and the frog followed, hopping with steady determination. Her room was neat, bed, pillows, toys, all in place. The frog looked around with interest. Comfortable, he said. I've never slept in a bed. You are not sleeping in mine, the princess protested. That's too much. The frog looked at her without anger. The princess sighed. She was not used to someone speaking to her like that, calmly, without fear, without begging. The frog did not push, but he did not leave either. She sat on the bed and looked at the small green creature. The frog nodded. She did not admit it, but for the first time that day, the princess felt the story was not simple, and that this frog might not be there by chance. She sat on the bed, turning the golden ball in her hands. The frog stayed on the floor, watching her quietly, with no sign of leaving. That bothered her more than anything. You know, she said sharply, you are the strangest promise I've ever made. And I am the most stubborn frog you've ever met, he replied with a smile. The princess tried not to laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched. She stood up and pointed to a small pillow beside the bed. Fine. You can stay there. Only there. The frog hopped over to the pillow, examined it carefully, and nodded. The princess turned off the lamp and lay down, but sleep did not come at once. Her thoughts circled around her strange guest and the promise she had made without much thought. After a moment, a quiet voice spoke. Princess? What is it? She murmured. I'm glad you let me stay. She sighed. Sometimes it does, the frog replied. Sometimes a small all right changes more than you expect. The princess turned to the other side and closed her eyes. She did not want to admit it, but his words stayed with her. The room was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Just different. Outside, the moon shone through the window and the palace rested in silence. No one yet knew that this night marked the beginning of a change that would touch not only the princess, but the entire kingdom. In the morning, the palace woke as it always did, with footsteps in the corridors, servants whispering, and the clatter of dishes. The princess sat up in bed and for a moment forgot everything that had happened the night before. Then she heard, Good morning. She jumped and looked down. The frog was sitting on the pillow, wide awake and watching her. You're still here? She exclaimed. Of course, he replied. Promises count in the morning, too. The princess sighed and got out of bed. I can, said the frog, and I will. She tried to leave him in the room, but when she opened the door, he was already there, hopping down the corridor with determination. A few servants stopped and stared. Is that a new decoration? One whispered. Don't stare, the princess said, turning red. He's a guest. In the courtyard, the frog sat beside her while she studied her lessons. When she frowned at a difficult task, he tilted his head. It's not that hard, he said. Try again. And how would you know? She snapped. I've spent a lot of time listening to people, the frog replied. When no one notices you, you learn a lot. Later, in the garden, he helped her find the golden ball that had rolled under the bushes. The princess looked at him in surprise. Maybe. You're not completely useless, she admitted. The frog smiled. For the first time, the princess laughed, really laughed. Not because she had to, but because it felt funny. She did not know what would come next, but she sensed that this day would not pass like any other. As the day went on, she began to notice something strange. The more time she spent with the frog, the less his presence bothered her. He did not push or demand. He was simply there, watching, listening, and sometimes speaking at just the right moment. The afternoon found them in the garden. The princess walked between the flowers, and the frog hopped beside her, choosing his path with care. Why did you really want to come to the palace? She asked, without looking at him. The frog was quiet for a moment. She stopped. Not everything should be said all at once, he replied calmly. Some things are understood with time. She sighed, but this time not from irritation. It was curiosity. There was more to the frog than what could be seen, something hidden but real. When the sun began to set, they sat by the fountain where everything had begun. The water reflected the light, and the golden ball lay beside the princess still. She picked it up and held it out to the frog. The frog looked at her, surprised. At that moment, something faint shimmered in the water. It was not bright and not loud, just a quiet glow that no one else would have noticed. But they both felt it. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared. The princess leaned over the fountain, trying to see if she had imagined it. Did you see that? She asked. Yes, said the frog, and that's exactly what I was afraid of. She turned to him sharply. The frog sighed and hopped onto the edge of the fountain. You speak in riddles, she said. Tell me plainly. The frog looked at her seriously, no jokes, no smile. The princess listened without interrupting. Magic punished me, he went on, until I learned to value my words and the people around me, but spells don't break just like that. They wait for the right moment. And that moment is now? She asked softly. Almost, the frog replied, but only if the promise is accepted for real. Not out of need, not out of anger, but because you choose it. The princess looked at the palace, then at the fountain, then back at the frog. She remembered how at first she had only wanted her ball back, then how annoyed she had been. And now she was no longer sure when things had changed. If it happens, she said slowly, it won't be because I have to. It will be because I decide. The frog nodded. The water in the fountain shimmered again, this time a little stronger. The princess stepped forward without pulling back. She was ready for the final part of the story. The princess reached out her hand toward the frog without hesitation, not because she expected a miracle, but because she was no longer running from it. At that moment, the water in the fountain rose slightly, and the air around them filled with a light that did not blind but warmed. The frog jumped into the fountain and vanished beneath the surface. The princess did not move. She stood still, the golden ball in her hands, and waited. A figure rose from the water, not a frog, but a young man, simply dressed, with a steady gaze. He stood on the edge of the fountain and drew a deep breath, as if for the first time in a long while. "It's over," he said with a smile. "The spell." The princess looked at him carefully. "I was," he replied, "and I am again, but not the same, and I don't want to be." She smiled slightly. They walked toward the palace together. The king greeted them first with surprise, then with understanding, and finally with a broad smile. The story of the frog spread quickly through the kingdom, but this time people did not laugh. They listened. The prince stayed in the palace, not as a guest, but as someone who wanted to begin again. He helped, learned, made mistakes, and tried once more. And the princess no longer thought of promises as words spoken in a hurry. The golden ball stood in a visible place, not as a toy, but as a reminder of the day when one careless promise changed far more than anyone had expected. And the palace was noisy again, lively and full of laughter, this time in a completely new way.